trouble in Toronto, tough talk from Michael Ballack's camp, and big bucks in Chicago next on The Daily. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of The Daily here with Andrew Reeby. I'm Nick Fershaw, looking at the biggest headlines in MLS, and we're starting with Toronto FC. Some trouble for the Reds up north. Torsten Frings, the holding midfielder and designated player, expected to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a strained hamstring. He's going to miss that big CONCACAF Champions League semifinal series against Santos Laguna.
Yeah, Nick, if there was one player that Toronto FC could not afford to be without for this tie, it's probably Torsten Frings. And as it stands, we'll probably see Julian de Guzman and Terry Dunfield fill in for him in that kind of holding and box-to-box role. But Frings is a huge loss for them, especially on the defensive side. We saw when he came into that team last year, they solidified things and had a good run. Oftentimes he drops in between the center backs in times of need, picks up the ball there, gets their offense going. Without him, they're going to have a real problem stopping that explosive offense of Santos Laguna.
You're right. We certainly saw a boost for Toronto FC's defense after Torsten Frings came on board mid-season last year. Again, Toronto FC, the first leg of that CONCACAF Champions League series, March 28th up in Toronto. Next up, the latest news in the Michael Ballack saga. We're hearing reports that the former German international going to join MLS sometime this summer. But some news here. His agent taking a dig at the New York Red Bulls, saying that sporting director Eric Soler clueless about a recent comment he made about Michael Ballack.
Yeah, quite a claim, and I think it all comes down to the fact that Soler maybe doesn't see Ballack the same way his agent does, and that's as an attacking midfielder, a guy to pull the strings. Word from them is that Soler has disrespected Ballack in some ways by calling him a holding midfielder, a guy to control things from the back, and that's simply not what he sees himself at this point. Another big point of contention in that one, Stephen Ireland is a guy that the Red Bulls have been looking at, and Michael Ballack's agent frankly thinks that's ridiculous. I don't know if I agree. There's a 10-year age gap difference there. If you look at their stats, especially in the Premier League, Stephen Ireland has the better season in his career, but it'll be interesting to see how this one comes together. The other three teams supposedly in the running for that one, Montreal, Philadelphia, and Chicago. So it seems if he does arrive, an Eastern Conference team will get a designated player and we'll get a German international of great pedigree.
Certainly a lot of teams potentially interested in Michael Ballack. Wherever he fits on the team. We're going to find out where he's headed sometime this summer. Well, speaking of big bucks for big players, the Chicago Fire could be in the buyer's market this summer. The Chicago Fire have had 3 designated players in their history, and Fire owner Andrew Houtman saying, yeah, they've got the money and the will to maybe get another one this summer. Andrew Houtman met with the media in Chicago recently and said they might spend Robbie Keane type money on a player in Chicago.
Yeah, the big thing is for him is finding the right fit, and that certainly hasn't happened with the 2 designated players that have arrived in Chicago on his watch. Nery Castillo and Freddie Ljungberg arriving within weeks of each other in 2010. They were gone very quickly after that, did not produce the way that team had hoped them to, but he says they'll spend the money if it happens now. It's just about finding that right player once again. He said all the decisions are left to Frank Klopas and his technical staff. He's only recently become involved in that, so we'll see who Klopas and his staff can identify, and then if they can get those negotiations done. Of course, that's always the most difficult part.
The Chicago Fire have never been shy about spending money. Obviously, Cuauhtemoc Blanco cost a pretty penny back in the day, but certainly the best designated player they've had out there in Chicago. Next up, some big player news for the teams down in Texas. The Houston Dynamo and FC Dallas have big games this weekend. The Houston Dynamo on the road at Seattle on Friday night, and FC Dallas on the road Sunday night at Sporting Kansas City. Found out yesterday that Houston's going to be without 2 guys, and FC Dallas without 2 of their stars, David Ferreira and Fabian Castillo, still coming back from injury.
Yeah, on the Houston side, Javon Watson and Jermaine Taylor will not be around. They've been called up to the Jamaica-Costa Rica match, and Houston has released them, so they'll have to find a way to replace those 2 guys. 2 crucial cogs in those first 2 wins for them on the road. And then on the other side, still dealing with injury issues in FC Dallas with those 2 star players. Fabian Castillo, a knee contusion, issues there. We'll see if he comes back. Apparently he's been training this weekend, as has David Ferreira, although not at full strength. He's got a bone bruise in his foot. They're still kind of waiting to see how that one ends up. He says, the more he plays on it, the more it'll hurt. So they're trying to give him rest, trying to give him time to get back.
Certainly 2 of the best games this weekend, really. Houston at Seattle and FC Dallas at Sporting Kansas City. That does it for us, but I want to mention a couple more things before we go. The latest edition of Extra Time Radio is out. We had Davy Arnaud, the captain of the Montreal Impact, the man who scored the first ever goal in Impact history. It was great to talk to him.
Yeah, and interesting enough, wild night for Davy after that game, or maybe not so much, a family man. But on the other side, David Estrada was here as well to talk to us, or when it's not here, we talked to him on the phone, but found out a few things about his bowling game and how lucky a man Servando Carrasco is.
Yeah, very lucky man for the Seattle Sounders. You can also find out where the Sounders are on the latest edition of the MLSsoccer.com Power Rankings. Those come out on Tuesday, and as always, make sure you log on and vote for the AT&T MLS Goal of the Week. You can find that on MLSsoccer.com.